The USS Prometheus was supposed to be the future of Starfleet warfare. A multi-vector assault cruiser, autonomous, experimental, and unlike anything that had come before it. The Federation built it in secret, confident that no one beyond its borders even knew it existed. But the shadows were watching. In 2374, before the Prometheus could complete its shakedown cruise, it was stolen. Not by Klingons, not by Maquis raiders, but by Romulans. The hijackers overpowered the crew, seized control, and took the ship towards Romulan space. Their destination? Not Romulan Fleet Command, not even the Senate, but something deeper. The Talshiar. As the ship crossed the neutral zone, 3 D'Deridex-class warbirds decloaked to escort it home. Not military reinforcements, but accomplices. This wasn't a rogue act. It was an operation. It was coordinated, it was planned, but it was authorized by no one but the Empire's secret police. The Talshiar had moved its pieces into position, building an entire task force hidden from the chain of command. Their objective wasn't conquest, it was infiltration. The goal was to study, dissect, and replicate Starfleet's most advanced weapon before the Federation even knew it was gone. But that was the mistake. The moment they revealed themselves, the galaxy got a glimpse of something Starfleet had long suspected, but could never prove. The Romulans had their own shadow fleet. Unofficial, unacknowledged, and operating entirely outside of the Empire's authority. This wasn't their first operation, not by far, and it wouldn't be their last. From Unification's disguised invasion fleet, to the Talshiar's secret armada in the Omarion Nebula, to Commodore O's infiltration of Starfleet itself. Each event points to the same truth. There has always been another Romulan fleet, the one that fights from behind the curtain, the one that doesn't exist until it does. This is the story of that fleet, a fleet born from secrecy, forged in paranoia, and waging a war the Federation never saw coming. Long before the Federation, before Starfleet wore its first uniform, the Romulans were already fighting a war that no one could see. In the mid-22nd century, new talks of cooperation were beginning between Earth, Vulcan, Andoria, Teller, and others. Worlds that spent decades at odds were finally learning to share a table. Historians, or documentarians like me, would later call it the birth of the Coalition of Planets, a fragile alliance that would one day lead to the Federation. But to the Romulan Star Empire, that coalition was an existential threat. A united frontier of free worlds was something the Empire could neither infiltrate nor intimidate. And so, as the diplomats gathered, the Romulans chose another weapon: secrecy. And this wasn't anything new. As an example, on Vulcan, the High Command's leader, Veloz, began pushing for an unprovoked assault on Andoria. Outwardly, it was a matter of logic and security. But behind him were whispers, communications routed through shadow frequencies, subtle guidance from agents beyond Vulcan space. Whether Veloz was manipulated, bribed, or simply aligned with them by ideology, one thing is clear. Romulan influence had reached into the heart of Vulcan's government. His war would have shattered the tentative peace Earth had been trying to build. That same year, deep within Romulan space, Admiral Valdor oversaw another kind of attack. A prototype drone ship, piloted remotely by a telepathic Anar, could project any image its master wished. One day, it looked Andorian, the next Tellarite. Every strike it made drove their would-be allies closer to open war. The plan that they had tried so many times was simple: make the border worlds destroy each other, and let the Romulans emerge as liberators from the ruins. The deception might have worked, if not for the Enterprise in X-01 and Captain Archer, who uncovered the truth before the Coalition collapsed. 2 lessons were learned that year. The first, for the Young Alliance, unity required vigilance. The second, for the Romulans, that invisibility could be stronger than firepower. Within 2 years, the Earth-Romulan War erupted, fought entirely through radio transmissions and unmarked ships. No human ever saw a Romulan face. Every engagement was waged against ghosts. Even victory brought no closure, only silence beyond the neutral zone. This was the true beginning of the Shadow Empire, a civilization that understood the value of being unseen. The Romulans didn't just hide their fleets. They hid their identity. They hid their intent. And eventually, they hid their morality behind layers of secrecy. From these early manipulations was born a doctrine that would shape their entire destiny for centuries. If no one can see your hand, no one can stop it. The Coalition learned how to stand together. The Romulans learned how to disappear. When the Earth-Romulan War ended in 2160, there was no treaty signing, no parades, just silence. The peace that followed existed solely as a line across the stars, the Romulan neutral zone, a border no one could cross and no one could prove was safe. For almost a century, the Romulan Star Empire vanished from view. There were no diplomats, no trade, not even a confirmed visual record of their people. To Starfleet, the Romulans almost became mythic, the ghosts of a war and an event that no one remembered clearly. Then, in 2266, that silence ended. A single bird of prey crossed the zone and destroyed 4 Federation outposts in less than an hour. The USS Enterprise responded, and what followed became legend. It was a balance of terror. Captain Kirk's confrontation with the Romulan commander revealed more than an enemy. When the view screen cleared, the Federation saw, for the first time, that Romulans and Vulcans shared a common ancestry. One founded an empire of secrecy, the other a society of logic and trust. The shock of that resemblance spread faster than any plasma bolt. For years afterward, suspicion lingered in every corridor of Starfleet Command. The Empire withdrew again, but the fear they planted stayed. Border patrols reported unexplained sensor echoes, momentary contacts that appeared and vanished without trace. No official designation was ever logged, but captains spoke of ghosts at the edge of the zone. Whether rumor or reality, everyone knew what they meant. The Romulans were watching. 2 years later, in 2268, they returned, not as enemies, but as partners. For a brief time, the Romulans and Klingons entered into a technological alliance, exchanging ships and weapon designs. Federation sensors soon detected Romulan crews flying Klingon D-7 battlecruisers under their own colors. Officially, it was a gesture of cooperation. In truth, it was a quiet arms race, a test to see how many of the galaxy's powers could be armed or influenced without revealing whose hands guided them. By 2293, the shadows reached all the way to Earth itself. When Klingon Chancellor Gorkon was assassinated en route to the Khitomer Peace Conference, the trail led to a conspiracy of Klingon hardliners, Starfleet officers, and one name that surprised no one, Ambassador Nanklis, the Romulan envoy to the Federation. Nanklis wasn't trying to start a war for glory. He was preserving the only balance that ever benefited the Romulans. A galaxy perpetually divided, where fear kept the Federation cautious and the Empire relevant. The Khitomer conspiracy failed, but it revealed a truth that Starfleet had long suspected. When the Romulans couldn't win through strength, they won through proximity, whispering into other people's wars until those wars became their own. A century after the first outpost burned, the Romulans had mastered their greatest weapon, the illusion of absence. The neutral zone wasn't a border anymore. It reflected 2 civilizations that defined themselves by how much they trusted the unknown. The Federation sought enlightenment in the light of exploration. The Romulans perfected survival in the shadows between the stars. And from those shadows, something new was taking shape. a secret organization that would soon command fleets of its own. The Talshiar were finally coming. By the 24th century, the Romulan Star Empire had learned that power wasn't measured by the size of its fleet, but by how many of its ships no one could see. The first incursion didn't come as an invasion. It came disguised as a Federation mission. In 2367, the USS Enterprise D was assigned to transport a Vulcan ambassador named T'Pel to the neutral zone. Routine, diplomatic, extremely uneventful. Until a transporter accident appeared to kill her mid-transfer. Hours later, a Romulan warbird transmitted a message claiming to have recovered her pattern from Federation space. When Captain Picard pursued the anomaly, the warbird decloaked and vanished, taking T'Pel with it. Only later did the investigation reveal the truth. T'Pel was no diplomat at all, but Sub-Commander Salak, a Romulan operative. The accident had been an extraction, carried out under the cover of Neutral Zone Rendezvous. It was the perfect infiltration mission. No battles, no casualties, just one false identity embedded aboard the Starfleet's flagship, and a single warbird slipping through Federation defenses to retrieve her. That success revealed a new Romulan doctrine: infiltrate Starfleet through its own ships. Where the Federation built vessels of exploration, the Romulans saw them as opportunities for misdirection, for theft, and sometimes disguise. Within a year, Romulan agents were using Klingon supply routes to smuggle components for covert fleet operations. Others interfered in Klingon internal conflicts, turning allied vessels against each other. Commander Sela, half human and half Romulan, armed the House of Duras and attempted to divide the Federation-Klingon alliance. It failed, only narrowly. The Klingon Empire had been seconds away from destroying itself. And that was victory enough for the Romulans. In 2368, the deception reached a new scale. 3 stolen Vulcan transports, re-registered as humanitarian envoys, crossed the neutral zone carrying 2,000 Romulan troops. The plan, which aptly should have been named Reunification, would have delivered a full invasion force directly to Vulcan's surface under the guise of peace. Only a last-minute interception by the Enterprise, which forced a Romulan to destroy the transports, prevented disaster. The message was clear. Even the most peaceful ships could become weapons in Romulans' hands. While diplomacy unfolded in the open, the Romulans quietly prepared for the next phase: technological infiltration. Deep within the Empire, scientists under the Talshiar initiated the Riemann Clone Project, an effort to grow a genetic double of Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Their goal was audacious: replace a Starfleet captain, seize command of an entire fleet, and guide Federation policy from the inside. The project was abandoned, but the principle endured. If you can copy the enemy's technology, their ships, hell, even their people, you can command their future. By the late 2360s, Romulan strategy had shifted from simple espionage to fleet parasitism. They didn't need to outnumber Starfleet. They only needed to make sure Starfleet could never trust its own vessels. For the Federation, the war had become invisible, fought not in space, but in the systems of its own ships. And for the Romulans, the Dark Fleet was no longer a rumor. It was the doctrine. By 2371, the Romulan Star Empire had mastered the art of operating unseen. They had placed agents inside Starfleet, manipulated allies, and used borrowed ships to wage proxy wars. But their next move would require something far greater: a fleet that answered to no one but the Talshiar themselves. To the average citizen, the Talshiar were the Empire's secret police, a name spoken quietly, if at all. In reality, they were an autonomous power with their own vessels, crews, and command hierarchy. They reported to the Senate only when it suited them. The rest of the time, they moved entire fleets without permission. In 2371, that independence became audacity. Partnering with Cardassia's equally ruthless Obsidian Order, the Talshiar constructed a cloaked armada in secret dockyards, a force so classified that neither the Romulan Senate nor the Cardassian Central Command knew it existed. The goal was simple: strike the Dominion first. 20 warships, Romulan D'Deridex-class warbirds, and Cardassian Keldon-class cruisers were retrofitted for a single mission: to cross the wormhole and annihilate the Founder's homeworld before the Dominion could threaten the Alpha Quadrant. The plan was pure Dark Fleet doctrine. No oversight, no diplomatic record, no return route. The fleet would travel under cloak, strike without warning, and be erased from history if it failed. When the Armada passed Deep Space Nine, even Starfleet didn't know its destination at first. Two intelligence agencies, historical enemies, were now united by their mutual addiction to secrecy. But the Dominion was already watching. The operation had been compromised before it began. Colonel Levok, the Talshiar liaison, was no Romulan at all. He was a changeling in disguise. When the fleet entered orbit of the Founder's homeworld, they had found out that it was a trap. Over 100 Jem'Hadar ships opened fire. Within minutes, the entire armada was gone. The Dominion had not merely destroyed ships, it had exposed the illusion of Romulan invulnerability. The Talshiar had built a fleet so secret that even their own empire could not save them. Officially, the Senate denied the operation ever took place. But Starfleet intelligence records from Deep Space Nine told another story. Romulan signatures vanishing into the wormhole, ships with no registry codes, no transponders, and no record of existence. In the Dominion's eyes, the battle was a warning. Even the shadow empires of the Alpha Quadrant could bleed. But for the Romulans, the lesson was different. Secrecy was no longer a defense. It was a weapon to be perfected. The Talshiar, in one form or another, would come back, and it would rebuild its invisible armada. Smaller this time, tighter, and with layers of deniability so deep that not even the Senate could untangle them. From that day forward, the Romulans understood that the most powerful fleet was the one your enemy didn't know existed. And perhaps they didn't know it existed either. The Dark Fleet had finally become real. The destruction of the Talshiar's secret armada in 2371 should have ended the Romulans' appetite for Shadow Wars. It didn't. Even before and after that failed Dominion strike, Romulan fleets were already practicing the same Dark Fleet tactics on smaller scales. From the late 2360s through the early 2370s, deception and theft replaced open war. The doctrine of invisible power had outlived the fleet that birthed it. As I discussed before, in 2368, the 3 Vulcan transports that crossed the neutral zone showed this excellently. If not for the Enterprise, Vulcan itself might have fallen without a single disruptor fired. This was the new Romulan playbook: war waged through stolen identities and repurposed fleets. Around the same time as the Talshiar's armada gathered in secrecy, another operation unfolded at Deep Space Nine. A Romulan delegation arrived under diplomatic cover, proposing an alliance against the Dominion. While negotiations continued on the promenade, a cloaked warbird in orbit prepared to destroy the station and the Bajoran wormhole. The plan was discovered and stopped, but it was revealed how every peace mission now hid a loaded disruptor behind its smile. A few years later, the pattern repeated itself in Federation space. During the prototype shakedown of the USS Prometheus in 2374, the vessel disappeared from Starfleet's tracking grids. At first, it looked like a systems failure. Then came the truth. Romulan operatives had hijacked the ship, had disabled the crew, and set course for home territory. Their objective was bold, even by Talshiar standards: steal the Federation's most advanced warship intact. When the Prometheus reached the neutral zone, 3 D'Deridex-class warbirds decloaked to escort it. Not pirates, not defectors, a coordinated Talshiar retrieval squadron. The mission failed, but the intent was unmistakable. If the Talshiar couldn't build fleets large enough to rival Starfleet, they would simply take what Starfleet had. Each of these operations, unification, visionary, message in a bottle, shared the same DNA. Romulan fleets hidden in plain sight. Science vessels repurposed as transports. Peace envoys armed for invasion. Federation starships stolen to serve in enemy colors. Within Starfleet intelligence, analysts began using a new term: fleet mimicry. The Romulan practice of copying or impersonating enemy vessels to bypass detection and exploit trust. It blurred the line between espionage and combat. A Romulan ship didn't have to fire a shot to win. It only had to look like someone else's. For the Talshiar, these weren't isolated missions. They were proof of concept. Each success showed that a Dark Fleet didn't require new construction yards or open budgets. Only access, deception, and most importantly of all, patience. By the late 2370s, silence along the border had become its own kind of threat. A missing ship, a false distress call, a convoy that never arrived. Each could be another hand of the Romulan Shadow Fleet reaching out through the void. The galaxy would soon learn that the Dark Fleet no longer needed to fly under a Romulan banner. For centuries, the Empire thrived on 3 pillars: secrecy, control, and fear. When secrecy failed, control collapsed. And when control was gone, all that remained was the same fear. Fear of the Federation, fear of the stars, fear of themselves. The Romulans' greatest weapon had never been their plasma torpedoes, nor their cloaking devices. It was their conviction that truth itself could be shaped like metal. Now, in the shadow of a lost world, that conviction endures. In exiles who still whisper the Talshiar's codes. In captains who refuse to uncloak. In agents who no longer remember whom they serve. The Dark Fleet may have began as a myth, a rumor of ships unseen, but it became doctrine, then tragedy, then legend. And like all legends, it leaves behind a question. Were the Romulans destroyed by their enemies, or by the walls that they built around the truth? In the end, perhaps the answer doesn't matter. The empire that once ruled through silence is gone, but its echoes remain in every shadow that falls across the stars. And as long as there are secrets in the galaxy, someone, somewhere, will still call them Romulan.